Bikers mock the wrong dog, then Shaquille O'Neal shows up. Shaquille O'Neal, a towering and calm figure, strolled along a quiet sidewalk with his prized Doberman Max. The proud dog, with its sleek black coat and commanding gait, turned heads wherever it went. Max wasn't just a pet. To Shaq, he was a loyal companion and an irreplaceable part of the family. They were enjoying a sunny afternoon, the soft golden rays bathing the empty street in warmth. Shaq savored the rare sense of calm after a busy week. But suddenly, the peaceful silence was shattered by the roar of motorcycle engines. A group of bikers appeared, circling around Shaq and Max, their eyes filled with mischief. One of them, clad in a tattered leather jacket and reeking of cigarette smoke, let out a loud laugh. "Well, big guy, big dog, but are either of you as tough as you look?" Max began to growl, his sharp eyes radiating vigilance. Shaq placed a steady hand on the leash, signaling Max to stay calm. With a deep, authoritative yet composed voice, he replied, "You might want to think twice before saying anything else." The bikers erupted into laughter. Another one, with a sly grin, stepped forward. "Relax, big guy. We're just having a little fun. What's the harm in that?" Shaq stood still, silent, but the steely glare in his eyes said it all. To him, these remarks weren't just directed at him. They were an insult to Max, a member of his family. Yet none of the bikers realized they had picked the wrong man to mess with. When Max barked loudly, and the leader of the group smirked and lifted his foot, the story was about to take an unexpected turn. Shaq walked slowly along the brick-paved road, feeling the gentle sunlight streaming across the peaceful neighborhood. Max, his cherished Doberman, strode confidently beside him, his ears perked up, as if savoring every sound around them. For Shaq, moments like these were the perfect antidote to the chaos of his busy life. Just him and Max. No noise, no distractions. The kids playing basketball at the end of the street waved excitedly, and Shaq responded with a warm, friendly smile. An elderly woman watering her garden nearby caught sight of Max and called out cheerfully, "What a beautiful dog, Mr. Shaq. He's lucky to have such a wonderful owner like you." Shaq gave her a slight nod, replying with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. Max is proud of that too." But as Shaq turned the corner into another street, the calm atmosphere was instantly broken. The roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the air, shaking the quiet neighborhood. A group of bikers appeared in the distance, each wearing worn-out leather jackets and arms covered in tattoos. Shaq walked past them without paying much attention, maintaining his usual composure. But Max, ever alert to shifts in the atmosphere, came to a sudden stop, his sharp eyes fixed on the strangers with a wary gaze. A coarse laugh erupted from one of the bikers, a man with messy hair and a colorful bandana tied around his head. "Well, look who we have here. A big star and his dog. A Doberman, huh? Looks fierce." Another biker chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Big guy, do you need that dog to protect you, or is it just for show?" Max let out a low growl, clearly unimpressed by their presence. Shaq placed a calming hand on Max's leash, gently stroking his head to reassure him. Turning back to face the group, Shaq spoke in a deep, firm tone. "Max isn't just a dog, he's family. You'd better move along and not do anything you'll regret." Shaq's warning seemed to fall on deaf ears. The bikers only laughed louder, treating his seriousness as some kind of joke. But none of them realized that they were edging closer to a dangerous line, a line they weren't prepared to cross. Shaq maintained his composure, taking a few more steps as though ignoring the group. Yet his watchful eyes never left them, and Max continued to let out low growls, his stance unwavering. The atmosphere thickened, like a storm cloud quietly brewing on the horizon. The leader of the bikers, wearing a black striped helmet and sporting a cold, sharp glare, stepped forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "Well, look at that. Your mighty dog knows how to growl. Tell me, do you think he can actually protect you from us?" Shaq didn't respond. He simply tilted his head slightly, his gaze carrying a silent warning. But the man didn't back off. Instead, he crouched near Max, his expression filled with arrogance. "Hey there, little guy. Want to take a bite? Or are you just here to look tough like a show dog?" Max barked sharply, startling the man enough to make him flinch and step back. But the rest of the group burst into laughter again. One of the younger bikers, who seemed new to the gang, spoke up hesitantly, as if trying to calm things down. "Hey, stop it. This isn't funny." The leader, however, ignored him completely, snapping back, "Kid, toughen up. This is how we have fun, isn't it?" As the words left his mouth, another biker reached out, attempting to pat Max on the head. But Max, with the lightning-quick reflexes of a well-trained Doberman, backed away and barked louder, his tone sharper and more commanding. Shaq, now standing firmly, lifted the leash slightly, his voice calm yet cutting like a blade. "Don't do something you'll regret. I'm warning you. I don't want this to go any further." The bikers fell silent for a moment, as if sizing up the man standing before them. But the silence didn't last long. The leader let out a mocking laugh, breaking the tension. "Out of line. What are you gonna do, big guy? Think you're Superman or something? Or are you planning to throw a basketball at us?" Shaq took a deep breath, his patience starting to wear thin. Max, sensing the shift in the air, began inching forward, his posture alert and tense. For a brief second, Shaq's eyes scanned the empty street around them. He knew this encounter was no longer just a joke. These men weren't just mocking Max, they were deliberately provoking him. But Shaq also knew that staying calm was the only way to keep things under control. He stepped forward, standing tall and unshaken, his gaze steady but burning with a quiet intensity. "Listen," he said firmly, his voice low but commanding. "I don't care how tough you think you are, but messing with me and Max means crossing a line you really don't want to cross. This is your final warning." The bikers hesitated for a moment, but the tension in the air had become almost unbearable. The leader sneered, taking a small step back before smirking. "Let's see who crosses the line first." The atmosphere was now razor thin, like a taut string ready to snap at the slightest touch. The bikers stood in front of Shaq, half daring him to make a move, half waiting to see how he would respond. Max, sensing the danger, placed himself firmly between Shaq and the group, growling fiercely, every muscle in his body primed to protect his owner. Then, with a smug grin, the leader took a step back and, out of nowhere, swung his leg toward Max in an attempted kick. Max, with his sharp instincts, dodged the blow with ease, but the act itself was enough to ignite the simmering anger in Shaq. That was the spark, and Shaq was done holding back. "What did you just do?" Shaq growled, his voice low and chilling as his gaze froze the air around them. The leader, Tucker, replied with a mocking smirk. "Relax, big guy. I was just kidding. You act like I committed some serious crime." The group erupted in laughter, but their amusement was short-lived. Shaq stepped forward, towering over them like an immovable wall, his presence commanding and unyielding. His voice was deep, resonant, and thunderous, like a storm breaking across a clear sky. "Touch Max again, and I promise you'll never forget today. This dog is not a joke, and neither am I." One of the younger bikers, clearly uneasy with where things were heading, stepped closer to Tucker and whispered urgently, "Stop it, Tucker. This is getting out of hand." But Tucker, consumed by his own ego, shrugged off the warning and sneered. "Out of hand? What are you afraid of? This is our turf." Then, without warning, Tucker lunged forward and grabbed Max's leash, yanking it hard as if trying to snatch it from Shaq's hand. Max, sensing the threat, barked ferociously and leapt forward in self-defense. Chaos erupted in a split second. Max reacted with sharp precision, while Shaq stepped in swiftly, gripping Tucker's arm with one powerful hand and reclaiming the leash with the other. Shaq's eyes now burned with an intensity as cold and sharp as a blade. He leaned in close to Tucker, his voice low but filled with unshakable authority. "If you think strength is about making others afraid, then you don't understand what real strength is. What he just did wasn't strength, it was weakness." The air became heavy with silence, broken only by Max's steady growls and Tucker's labored breathing. The weight of Shaq's words hung in the space between them, impossible to ignore. Before things could escalate any further, the distant wail of a police siren pierced through the tense atmosphere, its flashing lights spilling onto the scene and cutting through the suffocating stillness. A passerby, witnessing the actions of the bikers, had called the police. The flashing blue and red lights of a patrol car illuminated the brick-paved street as a voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Everyone, stay where you are. Nobody leaves the scene." The sound of the sirens cut through the tension, halting the heated confrontation. The pulsating lights bathed the area in a sharp glow, and the bikers instinctively began to scatter slightly, each wearing a different expression. Tucker, the leader, maintained his defiant posture, though his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. A police officer stepped out of the car, his figure solid and commanding, with a calm but firm look in his eyes. One hand rested purposefully on his belt, underscoring his authority. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady. Shaq, standing tall and resolute, kept his tone calm but unmistakably clear. "They've been harassing me and trying to attack my dog. I don't want this to escalate, but I can't just stand by when they go after Max." The officer nodded, his gaze shifting to the bikers. Some avoided his eyes, their bravado fading under the weight of his scrutiny. Tucker, however, clung to his arrogance and scoffed. "We were just messing around. He's blowing it way out of proportion. What's the big deal about calling the cops for this?" Max, standing close to Shaq, kept his eyes locked on Tucker, his body poised protectively. The officer crouched slightly to meet Max's eyes, his expression softening for a moment as he observed the dog's alert demeanor. Then, standing up, he addressed Tucker with a sharp tone. "Messing around? Kicking someone's dog and trying to snatch the leash is not messing around. Do you realize how dangerous your actions could have been?" Tucker opened his mouth to respond, but another officer, a woman with a commanding presence, stepped forward, her voice firm and unyielding. "You all need to understand something. This is disorderly conduct and could have serious consequences. If he hadn't kept his cool, you would already be facing those consequences right now." The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving Tucker momentarily speechless. Max, sensing the shift in power, stood silently by Shaq's side, his posture steadfast, as though ready to protect his family, no matter what. Shaq didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes said it all. His silent glare conveyed a clear message to the bikers. Their behavior needed to stop, not just today, but forever. At that moment, the growl of another motorcycle echoed down the street. A man with silver hair and an imposing presence dismounted gracefully. His leather jacket bore the insignia of the biker club, but his demeanor couldn't have been more different from Tucker's crew. This was someone who carried himself with responsibility and authority. "Officer," the man began, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm Pete, president of this biker club. I heard about the incident and came straight here." Pete's arrival caused Tucker and the bikers to freeze, their previous arrogance melting away. Pete scanned the group with a piercing gaze, his eyes sharp enough to cut through any excuses. "Tucker," Pete said, his voice firm, "what is going on here? I've made it clear. We never cause trouble or harm others. Have you forgotten the principles we stand for?" Tucker lowered his head, as if realizing there was no defense he could offer. But Pete wasn't finished. "We are a club," Pete continued, his voice rising slightly, "not a gang of thugs. If you think strength is about intimidating others, then you don't belong here." Pete then turned to Shaq, his stern expression softening into one of sincere regret. "Mr. O'Neal, I deeply apologize for what happened. These individuals do not represent who we are, and I promise they will be held accountable for their actions." Pete's calm authority and unwavering sense of justice diffused the tension that had gripped the air. The police officer, observing the shift in control, gave Pete a curt nod and said, "I trust you'll handle this the right way. But let me be clear. If there are any further violations, they won't get off so easily." Pete nodded solemnly, the weight of responsibility evident in his stance. The situation, while not yet resolved, had shifted toward a place of accountability and order. Pete nodded, and as the bikers were ordered to step aside, Shaq crouched down to stroke Max's head gently, whispering, "We're okay now, buddy. We're okay." Pete, the president of the biker club, stood in the center of the group, his piercing gaze sweeping across each member as if to remind them who was in charge. Without raising his voice, his firm and steady tone carried a weight that silenced the bikers. "Tucker, Vince, and the rest of you," Pete began, his eyes locking onto each face. "Do you have any idea how your actions today have disgraced this club? I didn't establish this group so you could go out there and drag our name through the mud." Tucker dropped his head, but his defiance lingered as he mumbled, "We were just joking around. We didn't mean anything serious." Pete cut him off, his voice carrying a hint of anger. "Joking? Kicking a dog is joking? Harassing a man out for a walk is joking? If that's what you think, then you don't understand a single thing this club stands for." Shaq stood back, watching in silence. He let Pete handle the situation, but his expression showed a quiet respect for the way the man dealt with the chaos, with conviction and reason. Pete's tone softened slightly, though it retained its authority. Our club is built on principles, on values. We are a community of strong individuals, but real strength doesn't come from bullying or intimidation. Real strength is about responsibility and how we treat those who are weaker than us. Pete turned to Shaq, his expression sincere and apologetic. Shaq, on behalf of the club, I apologize to you and Max. These men do not reflect our values, and I will make sure this never happens again. Shaq nodded, his deep, calm voice carrying both understanding and respect. I can see that men like you, Pete, truly understand the meaning of strength. I hold no grudge, but I hope they learn something from today. Pete gave a firm nod and turned to Tucker and Vince for the final time. His voice was steady, but the finality in his words was unmistakable. You two are no longer part of this club. Hand over your patches and leave. I don't need anyone who doesn't respect our principles. Tucker opened his mouth as if to protest, but the unwavering look in Pete's eyes silenced him. Without another word, both Tucker and Vince quietly removed their patches, placing them into Pete's outstretched hand. Then, shoulders slumped, they walked away in silence. As they disappeared down the street, Pete turned back, his face now showing a trace of relief, though his voice carried a note of sadness. I hope what happened today teaches all of us, including them, a lesson. Making a mistake is one thing, but refusing to acknowledge it, that's what's truly dangerous. Shaq knelt down to stroke Max, who had calmed now that the danger had passed. Looking back at Pete, Shaq spoke with genuine admiration. I respect how you handled this, Pete. Thank you for doing the right thing. Pete extended his hand, and Shaq accepted it in a strong handshake. It wasn't just me, Pete replied. It was all of us. We all need to be reminded that true strength is never about intimidation or causing harm. That's the lesson for everyone here today. After Tucker and Vince walked away, the air grew still, broken only by the fading sound of their footsteps. Pete remained standing there, his expression thoughtful as he stared down at the patches in his hands. These weren't just pieces of fabric. They were symbols of pride and responsibility, things those two had forfeited through their actions. Shaq stepped forward, his voice carrying a meaningful weight. Pete, I know you want the best for your club. Maybe today is an opportunity, for them and for us, to learn something bigger. Pete turned, a flicker of realization lighting up his eyes, as though an idea had just taken shape. You're right, Shaq. People can change if they're guided the right way. But that change has to start with understanding that real strength isn't about control or intimidation. Shaq nodded, his gaze shifting toward the remaining bikers, who now looked pensive, clearly affected by what had just happened. We all make mistakes, Shaq continued. The question is, are we willing to turn those mistakes into lessons? Pete offered a small smile before addressing the group. This time, his voice was firm, but devoid of anger. Listen carefully. Starting today, I want each of you to ask yourself this. What is my strength being used for? If the answer isn't to help others, then we're on the wrong path. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, then added with a decisive tone. And we'll start fixing that right now. This Saturday, I'm organizing an event to support the local animal rescue center. Everyone here is expected to participate. That's how we make up for what happened today and prove that we're more than just loud bikers riding around town. The bikers exchanged glances, their expressions gradually softening, as if realizing the opportunity to rebuild the club's values and their own character. Pete's proposal caught some of the bikers off guard, their surprise evident in their wide eyes and hesitant glances. But then, the youngest member of the group stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. I think that's a great idea, Pete. Count me in. I'm ready to help. Shaq turned to Pete, a look of approval spreading across his face. You're a true leader, Pete. You know how to turn a mistake into something meaningful. I believe these guys will come to understand the value of today's lesson. Pete knelt down to pat Max gently, as if to thank the dog for playing a key role in illuminating the day's teachings. Then turning back to Shaq, his tone softened considerably. Thank you, Shaq. Not everyone could have handled this with the patience and composure you showed. You didn't just protect Max. You helped us see what truly matters. Shaq smiled in return, his voice steady yet warm. We all learned something today, Pete. What's important is what we do with it moving forward. As the afternoon light began to dim, Shaq and Max turned to head home, leaving behind a group of bikers deep in thought, reflecting on everything they'd just experienced. Pete watched them go, his heart filled with hope that from this moment on, his club would become stronger, not through physical strength, but through compassion and responsibility. Shaq walked slowly along the road leading home, the soft glow of the setting sun resting on his broad shoulders and Max by his side. Max walked with a calm yet regal stride, as though he understood the gravity of the day they had just endured. Shaq bent down to gently stroke Max's head, his deep voice filled with quiet pride. We did good today, buddy. A lesson not just for them, but for us too. In the distance, Pete remained with the group of bikers, continuing to speak to them about the new plan. The cold, arrogant expressions that once dominated their faces had begun to soften. Now, there were signs of reflection, regret, and even a flicker of determination in the eyes of some of the younger members. When Shaq unlocked the gate to his home, Max bounded in with excitement, his paws clicking against the floor as if announcing, "Everything's okay now." Shaq let out a quiet chuckle, but his thoughts lingered on the depth of the day's events. He picked up his phone, switched to the live video mode, and began speaking with his calm yet powerful voice. Today, I was reminded of a lesson we sometimes forget. True strength doesn't lie in muscles, loud words, or controlling others. True strength is found in kindness, patience, and how we use our power to make a positive difference. Max, my loyal dog, has taught me so much. And today, the people I encountered showed me that anyone can change if they're willing to learn and grow. So, here's what I want to say to all of you. If you are in a position of strength, use that strength to help those who are weaker. If you've made mistakes, don't be afraid to own them and make things right. And if you see injustice, speak up. Because change begins with the smallest actions we take. Shaq paused for a moment, smiling warmly, before adding, "Thank you for taking the time to hear this story. If you found meaning in what Max and I experienced today, please leave a comment, share it, and spread the message of kindness and compassion. Remember, even the smallest act of kindness today can transform an entire community tomorrow." He ended the video, exhaling deeply as he settled onto the floor beside Max. His gaze was filled with contentment as Max rested quietly by his side. In that moment, Shaq knew that the best thing he could do wasn't winning a conflict, it was planting the seeds of positive change.